You wake up, reach for your phone before your eyes fully adjust to the light. Before you've had a thought that was entirely your own, you've already consumed 43 pieces of content. And somewhere in the background, something is being quietly withdrawn from an account you didn't know you had. The account is not in a bank. It is in your brain. And the currency is dopamine. The debt started before you noticed it. It is still running now. Here is what most people get wrong about dopamine. It is not the pleasure chemical, that is serotonin. Dopamine is the wanting chemical, the seeking chemical, the anticipation chemical. It fires not when you receive the reward, but in the moment before, when you reach for the phone, when you open the app, when you click. The researcher who changed how we understand this is Berridge at the University of Michigan. In 1998, his lab found that dopamine doesn't produce pleasure. It produces craving. The distinction sounds subtle. The consequences are not. Because a system designed for craving, flooded with modern stimulation, doesn't become satisfied. It becomes calibrated, and a brain that recalibrates around constant dopamine input has to do something to protect itself. It reduces the number of receptors. It lowers its own sensitivity. It adjusts its baseline downward. This is called downregulation, and it is the mechanism that creates the debt. Every time your dopamine system is flooded by a notification, a scroll, a hit of sugar, a win, it compensates. It pulls back. It requires more input to produce the same output. Scientists call this tolerance. You know it as, why doesn't this feel as good as it used to? The first time you checked social media, it felt like discovery. The 100th time, it felt like nothing. But you still checked, because the dopamine system doesn't seek pleasure. It seeks the anticipation of reward, and anticipation is cheap to manufacture. A notification, a like, a new message, a slot machine payout, a package arriving, all of them triggering your anticipation circuit on demand. All of them designed by engineers with PhDs in behavioral science to trigger your anticipation circuit on demand. The 2021 Facebook whistleblower documents describe this explicitly. The platform was engineered to maximize dopamine-driven engagement, not satisfaction. Satisfaction ends the session. Craving continues it. So the modern digital environment is not designed to fulfill you. It is designed to keep you wanting. And a brain kept perpetually wanting, perpetually spiked, perpetually reaching, is a brain quietly lowering its own floor. The research on what chronic dopamine flooding does to the brain is not theoretical. It is measurable. It is visible on imaging. And the numbers are significant. A 2023 meta-analysis in JAMA Psychiatry found that heavy smartphone users showed measurable reductions in dopamine receptor density in the striatum. The striatum is the brain's primary reward processing center. Reduced receptor density means the same event, a meal, a conversation, a sunset, produces less dopamine response than it would in a non-downregulated brain. The clinical term for this condition is anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure from activities that previously brought it. It is one of the primary symptoms of depression, and it is being documented in populations with no other clinical presentation. People who describe themselves as fine, not depressed, but who report that nothing feels particularly interesting anymore, that they are bored faster, satisfied less, distracted more. This is not a mood, it is a biological adjustment. The brain running its protection protocol. And it has a cost, measured not in feelings but in function, in focus, in motivation, in the capacity to engage deeply with anything that doesn't deliver an immediate spike. The dopamine debt does not stay in the brain. It reaches into every domain that requires sustained attention, delayed gratification, or genuine presence. A 2022 study from the University of California found that chronic high-stimulation media consumption reduced the ability to sustain focus by an average of 40%. 40% in subjects who would not describe themselves as addicted to anything. A separate study on relationship satisfaction found a direct correlation between smartphone use and presence impairment, the measured inability to be fully in a conversation. Your partner is speaking. You are listening. But part of your processing capacity is already anticipating the next stimulation. The brain trained for constant input cannot fully inhabit a moment that delivers nothing immediately. It is not rudeness. It is neurology. But the relationship doesn't distinguish between the two. The invoice for your dopamine debt is paid, in part, by the people who needed you to be present. No narration. Invoice filling. Line items 1 through 3 appearing. No narration. Invoice filling. Line items 4 through 6. Total climbing. No narration. Final total revealed. Red circle appears. Let's put a number on it. A 2023 productivity study from UC Irvine calculated that the average knowledge worker is interrupted every 47 seconds when a phone is present. After each interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes to return to full cognitive engagement with the original task. Across an 8-hour workday, that represents a measurable loss of deep work capacity. Researchers who quantified this estimate the annual cost of attention fragmentation at between $4,000 and $9,000 per worker per year. In lost productivity, in errors, in the slower thinking of a brain operating in constant context switch mode. Add the sleep component. Dopamine dysregulation directly affects melatonin production. Heavy screen users before sleep show a 45-minute delay to sleep onset. Across a year, more than 11 days of lost sleep. Add the motivation deficit. A downregulated dopamine system has difficulty initiating tasks that don't deliver immediate reward. This is why the projects you care about most are precisely the ones that feel hardest to start. Not because you're lazy, because your brain has been calibrated to expect a faster return. The total dopamine debt across attention, productivity, relationships, sleep, and motivation is a number almost no one has calculated, but they are living it every day in the feeling that nothing is quite enough. Here is what the debt is actually costing you. Not the hours, not the productivity, something harder to measure and harder to recover. Your sensitivity. A brain calibrated for constant stimulation loses the capacity for quiet reward. The walk, the conversation, the page of a book, the meal without a screen. These are not small things. These are the textures of a life. And a dopamine-indebted brain experiences them as insufficient, as slow, as not enough. Blaise Pascal wrote in 1654 that all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He didn't have a smartphone, but he understood the mechanism. The discomfort of stillness drives us toward stimulation. The stimulation raises the floor. The floor rises above ordinary life. Ordinary life becomes invisible. What you trade for a life of constant dopamine input is not pleasure. You already traded that. What you trade is the ability to feel the things that used to be enough. The dopamine debt is not a moral failure. It is an engineering problem. You were given a brain designed for scarcity of stimulation and placed inside an environment of infinite engineered stimulation. The brain did what it was designed to do. It adapted. The adaptation is the problem. The research on recovery is also documented. Dopamine receptor density can recover, but it requires a period of reduced input, not elimination. Reduction, spacing, deliberate boredom. The recovery process feels exactly like withdrawal because neurologically it is. The debt is real. The creditor is your own nervous system. The repayment schedule is not negotiable. This has been the Behavior Report. Your behavior has a price. Here's the invoice.